Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. So with organic social media reach at times in a race to the bottom, paid social media strategies can be worth betting on for a lot of B2B brands. A targeted LinkedIn ad strategy, including as part of an account-based marketing strategy, can do wonders. So what are companies to do and how do they spend money strategically? To discuss this topic, I'm joined by Jonathan Bland, co-founder of Omni Lab and a paid media expert for B2B brands. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Appreciate it. Good to be on.
Really excited to have this conversation today. I know there's always a lot of, sort of mixed results that companies are experiencing when they first embark on paid social strategies. So I'm excited to hear from an expert.
Totally. Yeah. Especially now in these days. Because again, it all depends on how you measure it too, right? I think people need to always be reminded that there's certain campaigns that are direct response and there's others that are not, but we can get into that a little bit more here in a bit. So
awesome. Yeah. Can't wait. So first things first, where should B2B brands focus their paid social media strategy today?
I mean, I think the question really is, where's the audience most active? Right? Because at the end of the day, your audience is likely active on a lot of different channels. And I was just talking about this with someone on LinkedIn the other day, right? I mean, who doesn't use email, doesn't go to events, isn't on LinkedIn, maybe a little bit of time on Meta, Instagram, or Facebook. And so we're spread across a whole number of channels. And so the question we need to be asking ourselves is, what's the one or two we want to make a big bet on? We want to invest a significant amount of time for a longer period of time. We're not talking about a month-long test, but we're talking 3-6 months, a year, where we can truly make some headway in a channel organically or via paid, because not everyone's in market and looking for what we do at any given point. So I think that's number one, is the question of where's our audience hanging out and spending time? And I'll add one other thing to that and then stop to pause, see if you have a follow-up. But the easy way to kind of do this, to figure this out if you don't really know, is one, you can get active in the channel immediately, organically, without spending a single dollar. And so get active in groups, communities, conversations, people that are posting, any number of things, right? So that's the immediate thing. And if you start to see there's a lot of people that are in your ICP talking about topics that are related to what you do or related to the category of the product that you're offering, then good, we've got a good start. You can also go into the campaign manager. If we're talking about LinkedIn, just use LinkedIn as an example. Go into campaign manager, build an audience, see how many people are in that audience. And then from there, then you can actually run a short ad campaign and see what the response looks like. So I'll stop myself there, but that's like the big thing, right? Number one, we got to nail, all right, are there people that are in our ICP on the actual channel? And if they are, then it's a good chance it's probably a good channel for us.
Yeah, I think it's so important because I have this conversation a lot about just, I want to do a social media kind of strategy, but it's actually quite different between, like, your LinkedIn strategy is going to be quite different from an Instagram strategy. And I find it really interesting that some of maybe the most popular or most viral kind of LinkedIn influencers, if you look at even just their organic content on other platforms like a TikTok or an Instagram, they don't perform as well. And It's not because they are not good at social media content or not expert in what they're doing. It's probably more because their audience isn't really hanging out there quite as much.
Totally. Well, I think the thing with Meta and Insta is that, you really need to think about how you tailor the content to that channel, right? I mean, to your point, it's not going to be as easy as just taking the exact same ad that you had on LinkedIn and just throwing it over to Meta and having it perform. And so people are in different mindsets when they're on those channels. Now, I think there's a theory that a lot of people have that when people are on LinkedIn, that somehow there's this automatic interest of people looking for software and products and things like that. And while it's definitely like a work-based type of social media platform, although that's evolving too, it doesn't mean that necessarily people are just ready to sit there and see ads and see products. And also, I mean, that's not why they're coming to the channel. Originally, they're coming there to learn something new, to connect with someone else, look for a job, those types of things. Whereas Meta Instagram is kind of more of an entertainment channel, right? And so we're looking at entertaining videos, memes, we're connecting with family, friends, we're following interior design pages, all sorts of things. And so we can still blend in great content there, because it's not like there's this, if you've seen that series Severance, it's not like people have this moment where they end their job at 5 p.m. and then all of a sudden don't think or stress at all about anything that's happening after the job. Most people, especially in leadership roles, are still thinking about things at some level. And so you can still be prompted in a channel like Meta with Instagram and Facebook. You just need to tailor the content a little bit differently.
Yeah. And I like that sort of distinction of, that people are going to LinkedIn maybe to learn something, and they're going to some of the other platforms to be entertained. And that doesn't mean you can't exist in both places, but you've got to kind of tailor what you're talking about in those environments.
Exactly. And there can be education too. It doesn't have to be all just, crazy, outlandish videos or anything like that, right? There has to be some level, and especially depends on the brand. If you're a cybersecurity company, you're not just going to go off and start creating all sorts of really crazy content. You still want to have some direct dotted line back to the product or something that's ultimately educational at the same time. So it's kind of mixed bag between the two. But yeah, 100%, you're right.
Yeah. And so how do you think, has this changed, or has it sort of always been this way where, there's kind of different platforms, different types of content that are suited, and different audiences that live there, or is this evolving?
I think the content is generally pretty similar. It's just the way that it's delivered, right? And the style that it's delivered in. Because at the end of the day, right, I mean, you've got your strategic narrative, you've got a handful of POVs ideally, and then you've got little topic clusters around those points of view that you have as a company that create all the content around it, right? And so the content at the end of the day, in terms of the things that your ICP wants to learn about and the problems that they have, don't really change. It's just the delivery mechanism of how you deliver the information. And so, on one channel with LinkedIn, maybe it's enough just to have a carousel that kind of goes through the top problems that they have, ending with how you ultimately solve it, right? Versus maybe with Meta, it's actually going in and creating more of a how it works video and getting a little more practical with it and pulling up your actual camera and doing more of a influencer style video reel of you saying, hey, look, like I struggle with XYZ. I was in the same position you were. Let me show you how I actually do it in XYZ tool. And I think those types of things not only work well on Meta, because that's been proven time and time again with D2C brands, but it actually works really great on LinkedIn. And so I think there's some level of osmosis between the two channels, right? Where there's not necessarily this always we got to create custom content for each channel, right? Where you can still pull some new stuff in, because especially for LinkedIn, pulling stuff that's traditional or native looking to the Instagram meta world, pulling it to LinkedIn makes you stand out. And so sometimes it's going against the grain of what people are used to. So it's something to think about as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I have seen YouTube shorts perform really well on LinkedIn because it's a different shape. It's like it kind of stops people in their tracks a little bit on LinkedIn. But I mean, do you find that I don't find it works as well the other way around?
Not as well with Meta, and not taking a single like your stereotypical like single image ad on LinkedIn and then throwing it over Meta. No, not as well. Doesn't mean that, I mean, it kind of depends what you mean by well, right? And I think most people define well as conversions. And so I think the mindset is many people are there learning, maybe looking at something, looking at entertaining things. And so it's not to say that the ad that you're running on that channel, whether it's really entertaining or not, wasn't consumed at some level. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. The point is that people don't have to click and convert on immediately for it to be valuable. In fact, many B2B products are not transactional, right? We're not talking about $100 solutions for most B2B companies. We're talking about a $15,000, $100,000 purchase over the course of a year. And so you're not just going to be randomly scrolling through Instagram and say, yippee, like sign me up. But you may remember that brand because you are spending a significant portion of time, even more so than you are on a channel like LinkedIn. And so again, you got to take that into consideration. So, but yeah, agreed. You definitely, to your point, do what you can to obviously adapt the content to the channel. So
Yeah. Well, so let's jump into that a little bit deeper too, because you mentioned at the beginning, like it's about how you measure success. And so there's different ways that you can determine whether or not something's performing well. What are some of those different ways that you think about as, obviously there's a million metrics you can track. I talk about this all the time. Like you don't need to track all the hundreds of metrics that you can track, but there are a few that matter. And, what are some of the ones that you focus on that might determine success beyond conversion?
right. I mean, in terms of metrics, it starts out with number one. So leading indicators are not dead. I know that there's a lot of banter on that all the time over the last couple of years. We're incredibly aligned around pipeline and revenue with any client we work with, but it doesn't mean that leading indicators have gone away. And so, the first things that we always look at for, say, a brand awareness or website visit campaign or something which is targeting a cold audience, we're not looking at conversions in that sense. We're looking at how many unique people did the campaign reach, which is really important. We're looking at overall, what's the click-through rate, right? How many people are engaged with this ad itself? On LinkedIn, in a cold audience, anywhere from like 0.4 to 0.6% is pretty good. And the retargeting layer, 0.8 and beyond would be considered pretty good. Facebook's a little bit on the higher end. And so those are some initial like starting metrics. Then from there, like clearly we want to align on like, what is the definition of a high quality lead? And quality for me means things that match the ICP or someone that matches the ICP. And then two, someone that filled out a high intent form, not someone that just went in and filled out any willy-nilly form on the website, but something that actually has declared intent. Now, again, this is more of a sales-led motion type of conversation. And so for some people, that's an MQL. For others, an MQL is just a lead scored form fill off of an ebook that ultimately is ready for follow-up. So each B2B SaaS brand is going to have a different definition for these things, but whatever that definition is for you, that's what we need. Down from there is probably going to be something like SQL and then opportunity, looking at pipeline. And that's where we really understand, okay, cool. We spent a lot of money on this channel. We've developed some leads. How many are actually converting into anything downstream? And so LinkedIn, again, is always going to be a little bit tougher of a channel because it's really a better awareness channel and content consumption channel than it is purely just driving demos. Whereas Google Ads is a much better channel of saying, hey, I've got a group of high intent keywords, right? Like CRM platform, CRM tool, or the capabilities of what a CRM does. And then once I started to develop some of those conversions from the quality perspective, whether that's called an MQL or whatever high quality lead means, then we want to get some data back up into the channel to say, hey, great, how many of those are actually converting into ops? And what's the cost per opportunity? And does that make sense from a unit economics perspective? So those are some starting points. I mean, clearly revenue is the end goal at the end of the day, but if you get a long sales cycle, you can't just report on revenue. You have to look at other things. And you know this too, being a CRO, I saw in your background too. So I'd be curious your thoughts as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was always my approach. Like the concept of cost per lead is fine, right? I can very easily, if you really want, I can very easily get you cheaper leads and more of them. I can't.
Always.
It doesn't indicate that they're qualified. So
Always.
we've always looked at cost per opportunity as a more critical metric that actually makes the difference, right? Because the lead cost just doesn't matter in my opinion. So looking a little further down the pipeline is always a great idea. But I think what people really struggle with is some of those earlier top of funnel leading indicators and looking at a click-through rate of 0.4, 0.5, 0.6% and going, this is a good thing. Because I think the challenge that a lot of people have, challenge I have, right? Google is great for that like higher intent, these people are actually looking for what you're selling, but we still don't know that they're ICP. So it's tougher to target there. It's a much wider net. You can get really narrow on LinkedIn, but to your point, they're looking to learn, to consume new information. It's a great awareness building tool. So it would be great if we could really narrowly target people in a very high intent environment. And that's just, it's really tough to do. So oftentimes there's that I'm looking for conversion in the wrong channel. I'm looking for high quality in the wrong channel. And that blend of the two is where the magic kind of happens.
Right. Agreed. I think Google Ads is tough. There are third-party data providers out there. They provide some better match rates on Google Ads. And so there is a world where, the meta matches of the world, Clearbits of the world can create an audience outside of the channel and have that uploaded with a work and personal email match. But it doesn't mean that, to your point, you're still going to hit everyone in your ICP. LinkedIn still dominates that because people just keep their LinkedIn profile more up to date than any other platform in terms of work information. So firmographically, the native targeting in LinkedIn is just purely going to be better. Now, there's still lots of nuances in LinkedIn world, even still, but yeah, Google Ads is tough. I mean, one thing that's always been very difficult for us and many companies, but big enterprise brands. I mean, if you're targeting billion-dollar companies or 5,000 employees plus, going after those on Google Ads is always very difficult, to your point about size. And there are some filters and some things you can do within the channel to filter out small to medium-sized business companies, but it's still not perfect, right? And Google doesn't know everyone ultimately if they're not actually logged into Gmail. So, again, you just have to understand, based off the leads that are coming in from a channel like Google Ads, we know that we're going to get some bad quality ones. Are the good ones, based upon the cost of what those leads cost, ops down to revenue, et cetera, really worth it? Because maybe it's still okay that we're getting some bad leads in because it's still mathing out. So that's just, simple stuff. You just got to take the time and, do the numbers on. So
For sure. For sure. And I think too, there's some other maybe metrics that are outside of ad performance that can help to prove the success of maybe a broader omni-channel strategy, which is why I'm a big fan of an account-based approach, because then you can look at, if you're targeting a single account or a group of accounts and you see that you're getting more engagement from that company in your pipeline through other methods, then they're probably building up some awareness through the ads that you're serving them, even if they're not converting directly. So having that set up ahead of time and being able to track that and look like I'm trying to reach people at Pepsi, and all of a sudden a bunch of people from Pepsi are on my website through a direct traffic. That's not by accident. And looking at that is really important.
And really, the cool thing about that, at least keeping with the LinkedIn platform subject, is that you can do that pretty easily with LinkedIn's API now. And so you can pull out all the companies that have had ad engagement, impressions, clicks, et cetera, over a period of time. And then you can use some simple JavaScript formulas to actually do a match rate between the companies that are actually in HubSpot or in Salesforce or whatever your CRM is. And so you can do that manually on the back end in the beginning. Now, once you want to get a little more powerful, then you can have a Dream Data or Hockey Stack or some other attribution tool in the back end that's ultimately doing some of that aggregation for you. But you're right. I mean, LinkedIn's still an incredibly passive channel. And so while click-through rate's a good leading indicator, it's not the only one. And this has always been true. I mean, this is old as advertising, right? Nothing new. But it's important to remember, because everyone, I think, has this impression of advertising is, all right, I'm going to create an ad, I'm going to promote it, someone's going to click it, they're going to go to the landing page, and they're going to convert. And it would be nice if everyone took that path, but we all know that doesn't happen. Some people take snapshots of ads, they save them. Some just go direct to their URL box and type in the company, like, are these people even legit? Who are they? Let me do my own research on my own, not even clicking the ad. And so that impression still led them ultimately to potentially investigating your company, but you wouldn't have known that if you didn't take the time to understand that. And so I think influence is sometimes a dirty word, but you gotta look at that data, because to look in the narrow lens of performance marketing would be a mistake. So agree with you there. That's a good one.
So that's really interesting what you talked about, the LinkedIn API and writing that JavaScript to connect HubSpot data. Like, if somebody's listening in and going, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even know how to do that, like, who should they go to on their team to help them set something like that up? Is that like a RevOps scenario or marketing team? Like, what sort of skill set is needed to be able to implement that?
Yeah. I mean, I can go just a little bit in more detail. It's a little bit more simple, than I'm even making it. But there's a tool called Supermetrics. So you can use Supermetrics to connect into your LinkedIn ad account, and then based off of some parameters you put into Supermetrics, you can dump that data into an Excel spreadsheet. And that way you get the full amount of rows that come out of the back end of your LinkedIn. Because right now, if you're just in LinkedIn's interface directly, you'll only have access to, I think it's 20 or 25 company names or something like that for impression data. And so now you've got that all in an Excel spreadsheet. And then from there, it's about using Supermetrics again to get HubSpot or Salesforce data into some columns right next to impressions, clicks, and the account names that are coming in from LinkedIn. And then I can share at the end of the show a formula that we use to do this. But you can get really sophisticated with it. in terms of making sure the company names, even though they don't match perfectly, are still matched, like Apple and Apple Inc. and LinkedIn. And so there's some match rate things you have to kind of worry about. But if you just want to do a simple kind of poor man's version of it, then there's a formula that I can maybe send to the end of the show. And so each and every person could easily do that just as a starting point. That way, at least gets you some data. And then once you really start scaling your campaigns and you're doing more things around LinkedIn, and you want to see, to your point about ABM, Pepsi, and the whole journey mapped out, Dream Data, Hockey Stack, tools like that are pretty good for doing that type of analysis. So hopefully that's cool.
Yeah, super helpful. And I think it just brings up another point too of like, don't just look at the data that they're giving you in the platform, whether you're in Meta or in LinkedIn or whatever. They're giving you not a lot. So getting it out in some way is really important. So those are great tips.
Exactly. Yep. 100%.
So tell me, in your experience, what type of content performs really well? Maybe we'll talk specifically about LinkedIn.
Well, I can tell you the content that's doing really well is thought leader ads. Not sure if you've probably played around with them a little bit, possibly.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So it's more of, clearly you can create all sorts of type of content organically, and then thought leader ads, just the promotion of that organic post is all that is when I say thought leader ads. So you're posting from your personal profile. For those that don't know what it is, it could be a text-based post, a video, it could be an image, a framework, a template, it could be anything in terms of the content type. And then in LinkedIn now, since last year, I think March or April or something like that, you've had the ability to now promote not only your own post, but also any employee at your company that's associated, and as well non-employees. And so, for example, we could have some other influencer, for example, that shares the same audience as me, and I could get him or her to either do some type of sponsorship, and or maybe they just decide to post on it in their own regard, and then I might reach out to them to see if I can get approval to post that and sponsor it directly to my ICP, because maybe they mentioned my name, said something good about me, whatever it may be. And so the reason it's performing well is because it's very native to the channel. So people are used to seeing this format of text, video, single image ads coming from a personal profile. And so you get that really authentic type of experience versus coming straight from a company. And so the engagement rates are crazy high. We're talking 8 and 20%, which is significantly higher than what you would get on a single image ad campaign. And so that's something I definitely encourage some folks to kind of look into. And there's kind of a methodology, at least that we think about when to sponsor. Maybe we can get into this in more detail, but the way that we think about it is first, post out something organically, wait 2 or 3 days, because usually organic will fall off after about 3-4 days, unless it's gone viral, then maybe it'll last for a couple of weeks. But wait 2 or 3 days, and then just calculate your engagement rate off the organic post by taking all the likes, comments, reshares, dividing that by impressions. And then if it's over 2%, then you've probably got a pretty good performing post where it started to resonate with the people that are actually active on that channel. Now, this assumes that some of those people that are engaging are in your ICP, right? So you've got to have some level of an audience of people that are in your ICP, and then promote that so that you can guarantee distribution to them versus just allowing the algorithm to decide. And so stop myself there, see if you have any questions, but that's something that we've seen work pretty well, not only from a consumption perspective, but also conversion perspective. So
yeah, that's great. I mean, I think it's a great approach to take. I love your tip about, sort of see what the engagement rate is. Like, you probably don't want to put a lot of money behind something that maybe wasn't really that, resonating with your audience. So you already know that because it's been out there organically. That's a great tip. But could you tell me a little bit more about sponsoring employees or, like you said, other people's content as well?
So it's so funny. LinkedIn's so late at the game, as always. But in the D2C world, for any folks that come from that world, they've been doing influencer marketing for forever, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a new thing. And so, only in the last couple of years, there's been just more people in the influencing community of B2B creators that are creating all sorts of content. And so a lot of B2B brands have been partnering with those people. And so like Devin Reed, for example, has done a lot of deals. Dave Gearhart has done some with Hockey Stack. And so what these companies are doing is most of them are working out some back-end pricing deal to say, hey, If I give you my tool for free, will you say something good about it? Or will you take a look at it and say something good about it? Things like that. And so these people have huge audiences, some of these non-employees talking about this example here. And so what you can do is either decide you work out an arrangement on the back end, whether for, some financial incentive or not. And then from there, you can say, great, we want to structure a couple of posts around X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's a new feature release. Maybe it's a new report you release. Maybe it's something that talks about your narrative more, and get that person to write something about that specific topic. And then from there, what you can do is then promote that directly to your ICP. So now what it'll say is, if it's Dave Gearhart, right, it'll be Dave Gearhart's name promoted by Omni Lab, promoted by whatever company's name. And so now you've got the ability to get his name out, which he's going to like, right? Not only is the post going to get more engagement, he's going to get more followers, all sorts of things like that. That's great for him. But then you've also got the additional benefit of him coming from, a trusted voice of saying, hey, like, I understand this. I'm repping this brand. I think it's actually legit. I've legitimately looked at it, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe he uses it as well. And then you get obviously the exhaust of engagement from that. That'll come in as, potentially conversion signups, other things like that, or just general awareness of, oh, wow, like I didn't know this tool existed. Now I do because of this person. So it's a huge thing that a lot of brands are investing a lot more in. It's still very much early stages. I still see very few, but there's more and more. So
yeah, it's pretty new. I feel like LinkedIn is constantly rolling out new ad types without really telling us about it until you go to some ad and hey, what's that?
Exactly. Totally. No, 100%. No, there's no awareness. And even like the reps, I think, are having a hard time keeping up with it, which is good news, I guess, in a way, because LinkedIn's always been kind of slow about releasing new things. So
yeah. So jump on it now and before they take it away, because
exactly.
you never know. No, that's great. That's a great one to try out. So for anybody that's out there listening now, that's like, hey, I've just never gotten LinkedIn ads to perform, or we've never tried it, we don't know where to start. Like, how would you recommend getting started or getting back on track?
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing is, the basics, right? Establish goals. What are the goals for the channel? And, everyone's going to say, well, the goals, demos and signups and pipeline. Okay, cool. But there might be some other goals if you just look a layer deeper from a campaign level. And so you need to break it down campaign by campaign in terms of the metrics and measures of success. Clearly, everything should ultimately terminate in revenue, duh. But we need to have other metrics because we're going to be targeting people that are cold, that have never heard of you before. And so these people are not going to be likely in market looking for what you do. And so we just need to be very careful on choosing conversions and pipeline to be objectives for those campaigns, because you'll turn them off within 2-3 months and say it was a waste of money, when really, in fact, it was not at all. You were making people aware of you, that you existed, how it works, the problem you solve, all sorts of things, and building a retargeting audience of people that are warm, active, in channel and ready to go. So goals are the first thing. From there, really becomes targeting. And so we want to have a very clear definition. One thing I always say is, you sell your TAM to your investors, you market to your ICP today. And so I think many people conflate the idea of wanting to target everyone, all geos, all titles, just to get some data back. Not saying not to test within your ICP, but it has to be focused. And so that'd be a big thing. Next thing from there is messaging. What do we want to say to the audience? And so we got to be somewhat clear about that. And you may have some theories. Maybe there's some things that you're saying, hey, I don't know exactly what to say. Should we just test it out? Sure. But we should definitely have some concrete ideas of what we overall want to communicate, and then we can test around those ideas. So once we've got the messaging, then it becomes content, right? And so all sorts of types of content. The two first that I would always start with any, early stage startup. When I say early stage, I mean like, Series A to Series C. But that's product marketing and social proof. So product marketing is really anything that has a direct dotted line back to your product. So that's the how it works, the product demos, the problems your product solves, all things like that, the core capabilities, like what it actually does, because people don't know what it does yet. And so you can't market the way that Salesforce does when people already have a huge level of awareness around a number of the different products they have. And so we need to start there. And then social proof, obviously, for one reason of de-risking it for them. Have I used the tool before? Has Dave Gearhart, has someone else used it? We want someone else to kind of say, hey, no, I've been there, I've used it, it actually works. And so those are the two layers. There's thought leadership, and then regular traditional good old fashioned top of funnel content is the 4 buckets, but those need to be outlined. Then from there, then you've really got campaign limits. And so we need to figure out, based upon our goals, what budget are we going to start with? Because we don't want to push too much content into the channel. And I'm sure you've probably seen this all as well as I have. You got way too much creative, way too much content, way too many campaigns running for the budget that you have. And so all are struggling. You don't have enough data behind any piece of creative. And so there's nothing you really can do with that except run the campaigns for a very long time period. And so no one wants to do that without making some type of improvement. And so once you've got that kind of in line, then you can actually start working on the structure of the campaign and say, all right, well, I know that I want to have X amount of creatives per campaign, and I want to have this campaign targeting this vertical of my ICP or this vertical of my ICP. I want to have these retargeting campaigns focused on people that are already warm, active, and aware of my brand. And then I can outline the creative that needs to go into that. And so that's kind of like the A to Z, really high level, quick version of how to think about putting together at least a paid social strategy. Obviously, Google Ads is a slightly nuanced version of that because it's keyword based. But I'll stop myself there. See if you want to dig a layer deeper on any of those.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful, kind of easy to follow step by step. The question that I kind of always comes up is, when we're targeting these kind of narrow audiences, I'm sort of always directing people to a more narrow audience. Cause like you said, you can't put your stuff out to everybody and just get a bunch of metrics. Like having messaging that is relevant and personalized to a particular group, even if it's not ABM, but it's a really kind of focused campaign for a particular group is important. But sometimes there are audience size limits, right? And sometimes the audience that you want to reach, it's good to be narrow, but you can't be too narrow, because if there's not enough people in that audience, you can't serve them ads, right? So how do you think about that? How do you think about like the perfect kind of sweet spot of targeting when you're building that audience?
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, you got to be higher than 300 on LinkedIn, higher than 100 on Facebook, last I checked. So there's those minimums, but really it comes down to, I mean, LinkedIn corporate, if you ask them, will say 50K to 250K for an audience. If we're talking about LinkedIn, Facebook, higher than that, sometimes into the millions. But again, a lot of their feedback comes off the D2C playbook. But ultimately, it's really, there's not a sweet spot per se. It's really, are we focused on the people that are the best fit for us today? And if we're over the minimums, then it's a pretty good chance that we've got a pretty good tight audience. Now, where you get yourself sometimes in trouble, though, is that we know that not everyone's active on the platform. And so to, again, keep heavy on LinkedIn, just because I think most people are used to that platform as B2B marketers, the general rule of thumb is that you're only going to reach around 40% of people in your audience, meaning that 40% of people in a 30-day period are active. And so that plays out across many of the objectives. Sometimes there's audiences that are more active, like sales, HR, marketing, potentially on LinkedIn, versus other IT audiences, maybe not as much. Doesn't mean they're not there, just not as active. And so you really need to make sure you have a big enough audience to play into that discount factor. And so, if you only have 5,000 people and you have 40% of that, you just got to do the quick math and say, am I really going to have enough people that I'm reaching based upon whatever my goals were that I set in the beginning of this whole thing? And so that's kind of the way to think about it, within LinkedIn. But there's really no magic number. I don't think you should do what I think LinkedIn commonly advises, which is just artificially make your audience bigger through either audience expansion, network, or just add additional titles just because you should make the audience bigger. All that's going to lead to is just trash, bad quality leads, you wasting money on people that are not a good fit. And sure, maybe in channel looks like CPCs and CPMs have gotten lower because your audience is broader. Yeah, that obviously makes sense, right? A broader audience is always going to lead to lower CPCs and CPMs, but you've got to be very careful not to just judge the leading indicators, back to our point earlier, because all that stuff is going to be reflected downstream. And so now when you've got cheaper leading indicators, you might have more expensive lagging indicators because you're just not hitting the right people that are truly a good fit for your product today. So that's one take. I don't know if you got another angle there, but that's the way we think about it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I'm I agree with you on the expansion audiences. Like it's bad enough. I think it's a little bit of a black box when you put your inputs in to know that your ads are actually getting in front of the right people. Sometimes it takes a little while to see that data back from LinkedIn of,
Exactly.
who's actually getting the ads. But to then expand that beyond the people that you're specifically targeting, I'm not a big fan of that. And I mean, I'm sure there are cases where it's really relevant, but for the most part, if you're trying to be really targeted, you just stick with who you're who you're going after.
Exactly.
But
Please do that.
yeah, it's a good point about the not being active on LinkedIn, people not being active, because that really does cut down your audience size quite a bit. So you have to make sure you have enough people in there. But are there any like red flags that you look for when you're running campaigns, maybe in the early days, the first week or so, that you say, oh my gosh, something's really wrong here, or something's not resonating, aside from kind of maybe those standard metrics that we already talked about?
Big one's usually targeting, like we've talked about. I think we've hit that one pretty hard. Conversion tracking is the other big one. That's probably the number one thing that's always incorrect on most accounts that we look at. So, whether you've got conversions that are done directly in LinkedIn based off of a page load, like a thank you page, or you've got it set up in Google Tag Manager, ideally Google Tag Manager. But yeah, lots of times it's just conversion tracking is not set up properly, and so either they're sending things like page visits back to the channel as conversion events, or button clicks, or all sorts of crazy things I've seen. And so it makes it look like the channel's performing when it's not. And so unfortunately, there's some agencies out there and consultants that I've seen this happen. I think there's a lot of good people out there doing good stuff, but you just got to be careful, look at the data, take a look at the account, and scrutinize it. I mean, if you've got a $5 lead on LinkedIn, I don't know, that seems a little bit suspect. That would be an incredibly cheap lead, even for a content lead. And when I say lead, I just mean like a form fill. So conversion tracking is a big one. Exclusions and inclusions are big ones. So back to targeting to a degree, but when you're running retargeting audiences, especially on any channel, but especially LinkedIn, you've got a lot of customization that you can do on the exclusionary front. And so that could be things like excluding out your careers page, excluding out current customers, assuming you don't want to continue targeting them, your competitors, yourself, right? How can you save a few bucks on making sure that your employees don't keep seeing your ads? Now, there is one caveat to saying that, actually, where sometimes your own employees can be a good thing, because if they just like and comment on the ad, then that can actually help kind of feed the social proof engine. So as long as they don't click it, again, depends on the objective you use. But those are probably the three, exclusions, conversion tracking, and then making sure that obviously we're targeting the right audience. I mean, it seems like that'd be the basic thing to do, right? But it happens all the time where you've just got a crazy broad audience. So
Yeah, for sure. As we're talking about conversion tracking, actually, I thought of another thing. What's your opinion on how you capture the conversion, whether it's like your own landing page versus LinkedIn lead forms? Like, what's your experience between those different conversion types?
I've rarely seen a moment when a landing page outperforms a native lead form. So, I mean, if you're just purely looking from a conversion rate perspective, native lead forms will win out, hands down. The downside to them, though, is that many times, because someone hasn't really gotten to the website and done enough legitimate research about who you are, they a lot of times will not respond to your email outreach afterwards, or even if you send them to a calendar booking page, sometimes they won't book the next meeting. And so you've got to chase these people down a little bit harder than you would someone that actually goes all the way to the website. And so, we're really more in favor of just sending people to the website over Legion forms. It really depends on the asset, though. I mean, if it's, a webinar, or if if you're gating content or something like that, I would never send the traffic to the landing page. There's no reason to. You can build retargeting audiences off of Legion forms. And so there's really no reason to send it to the website. I would just go ahead and capture the information, assuming you're playing the kind of gated game, and then move on. But anything else in terms of ungated content, social proof, case studies, product marketing, any assets about things that you're trying to do, like they're educational, send that traffic to the landing page, let them kind of consume it, there, and ultimately don't, kick yourself too much for looking at the conversion rate between lead gen forms within the channel versus landing page, because again, rarely is it ever going to be that the landing page ever performs at the same rate if you're just looking at it at the top line. And so that's, again, back to the whole point of saying, all right, great, we're getting leads from lead gen forms. What's the conversion rate downstream? And then you can actually calculate your true cost per lead or cost per opportunity versus, versus just saying, hey, we win, everything's great. Lead gen forms are performing well. So,
yeah. Yeah, there's definitely like a quality issue the easier you make things for people, right? There's, you make it super easy, one click, even, thinking about job postings on LinkedIn, like the one click apply is always good. Aren't that qualified, but you'll get a lot more.
You will, and so that goes back to your point. You said it well earlier that, it's not a volume game, it's always been a quality game. And so the volume game is great in the beginning. And I guess if there's an investor group that you're selling, and this still happens to this day, where people just pump up leading indicators to get their next round. And like, I can't even joke about it. It legit happens without even any consideration around lagging indicators. And so, hey, we got a bunch of signups, it's all great. Look at our, graph. It's, going through the roof. And then that does get a lot of brands in the next round. And so for some, maybe that's the right play in certain scenarios. I think investors are getting more wise, though, around that and not getting fooled there. But that's happened a whole bunch over the last handful of years and prior to that. So it's just important to kind of always remember that, sure, things that can drive up volume is great and looks awesome on paper. Anyone can really do that. But everyone's going to figure out at some point, wait a minute, we got a bigger problem. Something's not happening downstream that we need to happen. Why is that? And ultimately, the finger is going to be pointed at either broad targeting, sometimes lead gen forms, and other tactics like that just artificially inflate numbers. So, but it's tough. It's tough.
For sure. Well, thank you so much. This was I learned a lot of like really specific things too, which I love. So thank you so much for joining today and talking about this stuff. And really appreciate it.
Likewise. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm going to be back with another episode next week when I chat